Everyday injustice. Too many wrongful convictions. Corruption has infected the criminal justice system, leaving too many people helpless, fighting for their lives. Instead of receiving justice, people suffer. Is that why they say justice is blind?
Today on Everyday Injustice, we have Nicole Lee, who is the executive director of the Urban Peace Movement, and Sikander Iqbal, who is the deputy director of the Urban Peace Movement. So welcome.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you having us on today.
So
Yeah,
tell
thank you
us,
so much.
what is the Urban Peace Movement, and what kind of work are you guys involved in?
Sure. So Urban Peace Movement is really a grassroots community-based organization. We're based in Oakland. We've been around 15 years. This is our 15th year. We were founded in 2009. And, I think the core of our work is that we do youth organizing. So it's really about, building youth leadership, investing in, just in the talent and the energy and the expertise, the lived experience of young people. And, obviously in Oakland, that's going to be young people of color, because we're such an amazingly diverse city. And yeah, the issues we work on are really looking at the intersections between community violence and mass incarceration. We believe those things are kind of, two sides of the same coin, that, we invest into our society, unfortunately has chosen to invest in these sort of punishment-based approaches, and that are really costly, and they kind of, take already disinvested communities and suck the resources out of those communities, which then contributes to and exacerbates community violence. And so we really work on the nexus of those things, and trying to disrupt what we see as sort of a downward cycle in our communities. And we use an approach called healing-centered youth organizing. And it really is about integrating healing work, and organize, kind of traditional organizing and activism together, in a cohesive kind of way.
Sikander, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think Nicole hit it on the head, but a lot of it is just saying, we're from the communities. The people we work with are from the communities. We know what works for us. And so a lot of it is trying to say, why are we doing why do we keep continuing to try to implement these same strategies that are being placed on us externally, that haven't worked for decades? So why not let the people do what they know works for them? And a lot of that is organizing, we're shifting resources and things like that. So, but I won't add on too much. She knocked it out. Yeah.
And so what kind of led in Oakland to the creation of this movement?
Yeah. So, 2006 is a long time ago now. But if, it's kind of a year that is very well known in Oakland. 2006 actually birthed the hyphy movement. So there was this sort of cultural upsurgence and renaissance in Oakland, particularly with hip hop culture. Sikander and I were a lot younger at that time, although I am much older than Sikander. But yeah, both of us obviously were much younger at that time.
Weren't we all?
Sikander might have been running around East Oakland with a gold grill on at that time. A very big shirt.
Yeah.
And so it was that was when Tell Me When to Go came out, and turf dancing sort of took a national spotlight, and major music industry producers from other cities, like the epicenters of, at that time, hip hop music, places like Atlanta and LA, came to Oakland because there was this sort of upsurgence of this culture. And so I think a lot of people remember 2006 for that, but 2006 also had a shadow side. And actually 2006, there was a lot going on in the community. And it was the second highest homicide rate in Oakland's recorded history, still to this day, was 2006. There were like 178 homicides, if I remember correctly. And so it was a hard time also. There was a lot of loss, a lot of grief. you know, and a lot of uncertainty for our communities. And so it was this very mixed time. And so, you know, we were working at that time on a very protracted long-term campaign to demand the closure of the statewide youth prison system in California called the CYA, but we couldn't ignore that our young people and our youth leaders were just going through it. You know, their cousins were being impacted. They were witnessing shootings on the weekends. And so, you know, together with them, we founded a campaign called Silence the Violence. And it was really about that. It was about, you know, looking at the intersection between mass incarceration and community violence. And that was really the precursor to urban peace movement. So Silence the Violence was, you know, there was this moment, I think, this feeling of just, you know, discouragement, you know, demoralization in the community. And so we created this campaign and, you know, was sort of a fluke of an idea. It just started with one conversation between 4 or 5 people. Our partners, United Players from San Francisco, got involved. 106 KMEL, which was a big hip hop station, got involved. And in 3 weeks, we called for a vigil and over 1,000 people participated. In, you know, there were 21 small vigils in 4 Bay Area cities. And I mean, literally happened in 3 weeks. And so it just spoke to like the power, the momentum that hope can have. I know it sounds cheesy, but it was like, you know, when you, I think that's what organizing is about. When you step into the breach and you fight, it gives people hope. And it swept through like a wildfire. I mean, I had never seen anything like that with that kind of momentum in my entire life. And so, you know, that was really the birth of urban peace movement. You know, that was 2006. And then by 2009, we were sort of an independent organization, nonprofit organization.
And can you kind of talk about, we hear a lot about the need for public safety. And, you know, I think what most of us have learned over the last 20 years is that throwing a bunch of people in a cage isn't actually the best way to create the public safety. And so kind of talk about the evolution of you know, the urban peace movement within kind of this narrative that I think has really changed in the last 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of what's changed over the years, I think part of it is just saying that, you know, we come out of a society that's really heavy-handed, really based in violence. It's really based in law enforcement, law and order. And I think that as people of color have gotten more rights, you know, as we exit out the Jim Crow era in the 60s, you kind of see this hyper focus on trying to maintain like a de facto segregation in the United States. And so you see the, you know, there's all the information is out there. Like, you know, Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, really, I think, chronicles it out really well. Like all the strategies that were put in place to keep specifically Black people, but really people of color separate from white people and white communities. And I think the way that our justice system functions, it is you know, it works hand in hand with that system. So we do see the redlining, the war on drugs, the tough on crime policies that came out in the 80s and 90s, and just how, not just what they did, because, you know, they operate under this guise of public safety, but we really see what they actually did was they devastated our communities. And so a lot of what me and Nicole have been working on for the past, you know, 20 years, 30 years have been really reacting to the devastation that was done by these policies that were implemented under the guise of public safety, but really destroyed a lot of our communities and families. And you know, and so that's why the narrative has changed, because people have seen, now we have seen and experienced and also have the data to demonstrate how devastating and damaging this was. So not only does these strategies, these tough on crime policies, not only do they just not work to create safety, they actually create more harm and more violence. And so a lot of the impetus for us is to say, well, we actually do want safety. And so what are the things that we actually need to do to bring about safety and prosperity in our neighborhoods and our communities?
And And so, from your perspective, where do you start? Because it seems like this is a huge, multi generational, intractable problem. You got to start with some kind of bite sized morsel. Where does your project start?
Yeah. So, yeah, I think we have a multi-layered approach. I think we're, of course, all of our nonprofits are doing multiple strategies at once. Um, but I think some of it is we have to organize, because there's an active opposition, and they try to use, as Sikander said, messaging around safety, but their agenda is really about something else. And James Bell, who's one of the sort of giants of juvenile justice policy, he's a national juvenile justice policy expert. He really talks a lot about how the current sort of law and order systems that are in place, they really are enforcing some kind of a social order more than they are creating safety. So I think, some of our work is about organizing and changing public policy. There are attempts currently right now on the right, to undo some of the reforms that we've won over the past 15 or 20 years. And I think our movement, and you have to give a lot of credit to the young people, because when I started in this work, I was only 22 years old. I was the same age as some of our youth leaders. And young people over the past 20 years have been pushing these issues forward and have been winning and have changed public systems. We actually did close down the California Youth Authority. But one of those wins was Prop 47. There is now an initiative on the ballot that is qualified called Proposition 36 that will be on the ballot in November, that is being championed by the Republican Party, the DA Association of California, the Sheriff's Association of California, and Mayor London Breed. And they are trying to push for, the undoing of Prop 47. And so they're using all these fear-based narratives to go after it. So, unfortunately, we do have to do defensive work, right? I mean, we have to do both. We always have to be on just like any sports team, we have to be on the offense and the defense, right? And so we will have to fight against these regressive policies. But the other thing I think we do is Urban Peace Movement and a lot of our allies, we try to demonstrate what real safety looks like in small ways. And so, for us, one of the things we do a lot of cultural events, because we believe that one of the things that creates safety is community and a sense of belonging, is when people are outside, when they're with each other, when we create spaces where young people of color, young Black and brown youth feel like they belong, because so many places in a city like Oakland right now make them feel like they don't belong. And that certainly exacerbates the problems that we're facing. So, an example of that is we throw an annual hip hop music festival at Lake Merritt called Town Up Tuesday, and every year it's doubled. So it started out with about 1,000 folks coming out, but for the first event for our teeny little grassroots organization, we were shocked at the response that we got. But this year, 4,000 people came out, and it was incredible. And we did press before it, and so KQED and other people were kind enough, the Chronicle, to run it in their date book and say, hey, you should check out this event, it's coming up. And some of the comments on the event were like, oh, well, just these cynical things like, I bet that's going to go well, things like that people were saying. And without us having to do anything, people we don't know got on the comments and were like, actually, it is going to go well. I was there last year and it was flawless. And I'm quite sure it's going to go well again this year. Like, people we don't even know defended us,
Yeah.
And then we had the event, and it was every year. It's like brings me to tears. It's so beautiful, so joyful. It's intergenerational. I mean, we say, hey, it's hip hop music. It's going to be hip hop. It's got cuss words. People bring out kids, and they have the most wonderful time. And it's just this, I think we've had people come up to us in tears, saying, this feels like Oakland again. Like, I know that this was for me. And that means something to me, you know? So I think there's small ways that community organizations like us are trying to demonstrate what's possible when we do what we say works, what we know works. And the problem is that our society, because of the politics of our society, just refuses to invest in what we know works.
Oh yeah, thank you. I was going to say another thing that we not just us, but us and a lot of our partners have to do is we know, because when I talk about we know what really works is like we're out there, we're on the ground, we see what's happening, and so we're still dealing with the strategies from the opposition that kind of center around like the Southern strategy that the Republicans pushed back in the day, or things like the Willie Horton ad, right? So when we talk about like Prop 47, like there's hundreds of people who have really benefited from Prop 47. Hundreds of people, really thousands if you count all the people in the communities, people coming home, people being able to reintegrate back into society, people to come back to their families and be a part of their, just returning to their communities, right? And what they'll do, when I bring up the Willie Horton piece, it's really highlighting this idea that because they have a different agenda, and they're trying to push these policies, and they'll hyper focus on any story that helps feed their narrative, and it'll destroy an entire program, or it'll reverse a policy that has really helped thousands of people, just for them to be able to move their agenda forward, even though it's not based on anything factual. There's nothing objective about it. There's no data to back up any of their claims. They're really just trying to find fear-based narratives to, kind of bully people into passing harmful policies.
Yeah, and it's the most sensational things. And so
Yeah.
unfortunately, those are the things that always get the press, so then our side comes out and we say, but what about the thousands of people that benefited from these programs that were funded because of Prop 47? And it just kind of like falls to the wayside,
Yeah. And so, that's what I was trying to say. Thank you. Yeah, the sensationalism. And so that's another thing that we have to deal with. And so when we talk about bite-sized morsels, one of those things is really to push and really highlight the successes and how powerful and how successful these programs are and have been.
Yeah, one of the things that you mentioned is kind of this pushback, and you guys are kind of at the epicenter of that, with the pushback against Pamela Price, and we saw it in San Francisco a couple of years ago with Chesa Boudin. I remember interviewing Chesa right after he got elected, and I said, "Hey, what do you fear the most?" And he said, "The first time that we release somebody on bail, who then goes out and commits some horrific crime." And sure enough, almost immediately, they get a guy that he's released on bail, and goes on this wild chase and ends up killing people, and it ends up being kind of the end of the story for him. And it seems like it's really important.
Even though crime went down like 20,
yeah, exactly,
under Chesa Boudin, and has gone up under his opponent.
Yes, thank you. And my point though is, you guys mentioned the fact that Prop 47 is another good example of this, is that we focus on all these high profile cases, but they're exceptions for the most part.
Yeah.
And what we don't see is the data, right? All the people that are helped, all the people that avoid having to be incarcerated because they committed some stupid crime when they were young. And because of that, they can now, get a job, go to college, do whatever they're going to do, and move on with their lives. But we don't see those. We see the guy who breaks into the store and steals everything on the shelf, and then races out and knocks 5 people over.
That's right. Yeah, and it's I think in this era of politics and the way that people consume information now has, I think, exacerbated that. And I think that is our frustration, and I think it's something honestly that we have to figure out on the progressive side, because unfortunately in this era of politics, it seems like the vast majority of people don't care about the data. I mean, you see that from on many issues, you see that definitely on the federal level. And there is this huge double standard that honestly plays to racist tropes, where you could have somebody who's running for the highest office in the United States right now, who is 34-time convicted felon, and that's almost not at all part of the conversation. But if a young person, robbed, went through and created, property crime and did a, shoplifting, that's front page news, right? And so it's just, so I just think there is this wild double standard, unfortunately, and it just, it does make our work more challenging because we're constantly, it's like pushing a boulder, it's a David and Goliath story. And that's honestly, that's the way it's always been since I started doing organizing in 1996,
There's a reason why we are where we are.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's been pretty incredible because I just saw, I think it was last night, that Fox did this study of crime that showed that actually crime is going way up. Did you guys see this?
I did not see that.
I saw it on X, Twitter, yesterday, but I mean, apparently it was an actual story that they did, and I can only imagine how they're skewing the stats to show that. But it's almost like these people don't care what the data is; they just want their narrative.
Yeah,
right. Or the data only matters. The data only matters where they want it to matter, right? Crime going up only matters in Alameda County, but not in San Francisco County, right? Because they have their people, they got their DA in San Francisco, so that never comes up there. And the media is so powerful that, I mean, you see it. I see people and hear people, and I'm often in conversations and even arguments with people. They're bringing up things that happened under Nancy O'Malley to criticize Pamela Price. Like, they'll bring up stuff from 10. I'm like, she's only been, some of them don't even know how long she's actually even been in office. Like, they're bringing up stuff that is literally just repeated talking points that they're getting from either actual media outlets or things that look like media outlets, which are almost even worse. And you see how, I mean, the media piece is definitely something that, to Nicole's point, that we need to figure out how to contend with. Because, I mean, it's not a new thing, right? Like, Malcolm X talked about how the media is the most powerful entity on earth because it can make the innocent look guilty and make the guilty look innocent. And then we see that all the time, like, just like you brought up the examples of Chesa Boudin versus Brooke Jenkins, when we're talking about what's happening in Alameda County, and it's national. And you see people, why they're so invested in outlets. That's why Elon Musk bought Twitter and, we're now called X. And you see the damage that he's even done in just the short time he's had that platform. Like, he's posting a deepfake video of Kamala Harris. He's posting, he's just posting a lot of this stuff that's very, very defamatory. A lot of it is misinformation, and a lot of it is really just, a lot of it is just skewing public opinion in a direction that is completely emotional, and it has no objective basis.
Yeah, it's it feels very manipulative.
Very much so.
And I think there's another piece to this because, one of the biggest problems that I see in this system. So let's say somebody commits a crime, they get convicted, they end up in prison. And most people that get convicted of a crime are going to get released at some point. I think the stat is like 95% are going to get released into the community. And so what do we want to be releasing into the community? Do we want people that are really constrained as to what they're branded with the felony tag? They can't get public housing. They can't get benefits. Or do we want to, educate them and job train them so that when they get out, they can get a decent job and they don't have to go back into the same lifestyle that they came out of? Now, I must be naive, because to me, it seems like a no-brainer that you don't want to release somebody who can't get a job back into the community, because they're gonna just get back into whatever they were doing before that got them in prison in the first place.
Yeah, it is adding damage to damage for sure.
So at the community level, how do you attack this stuff?
Well, I mean, so there's a number of things. One is, a big part of our work is, for example, UPM works a lot on juvenile justice policy, and the youth justice system is smaller than the adult system, but there are so many parallels between the ways that we treat young people. They have different language that they use, but there are so many parallels in the youth system and the adult system. They try to argue that they're different, and they are different in some ways, but yeah, there's just a lot of parallels. And so I think that a big part of what we're advocating for in a lot of our partner organizations is community-based solutions and placement, so that you actually give folks, when they're in crisis, the support they need, but without trapping them in the sort of revolving door of the criminal justice system, which honestly is the data shows is actually less effective and more expensive. And so, as an example, in Alameda County, they're spending $360,000. Oh, excuse me, $680,000 per young person per year to incarcerate to keep a young person detained in a juvenile facility. And in San Francisco County, it's closer to $1 million for one young person. So if you think about, like, if I'm a young person and I am in crisis and I got in trouble, and even if I did something very severe, right, in this very small number of cases where that happens, but you're willing as a system to invest $680,000 in me, you could literally change the trajectory a year. You could change the trajectory of my life with that kind of investment. But that's not what's happening.
Send somebody to Stanford or Harvard or Berkeley with that kind of investment.
Absolutely. Or you could pay their housing for years so that they would have a stable place to stay and they could, do the things that they need to do to get their lives on track. You know what I mean? But that's not what's happening. And so then you talk to the young people and you sort of see what's happening inside. Now, not saying that there aren't any good programs inside. Sure. Maybe occasionally a smaller number of people get a program that's helpful for them inside. But in general, we hear reports that the youth facilities say that they're understaffed. I mean, these are things that the probation department is reporting themselves, that they're understaffed because the facility is so large and there's a small number of young people in this large facility. So they have to have all these staff to manage the facility, but there's not enough staff to interface with the young people. So young people for weeks upon end cannot get outside. So they're kept in confinement inside, which is super unhealthy. Sometimes they're left to languish in individual rooms in these large facilities essentially in isolation. So if a young person has a mental health issue, anxiety, something like that, it's like the worst thing you can do for them. And their brains are actually developing at that time. So you're actually imprinting. It's different if that happens to somebody who's, 17 or 18 than my brain, because my brain is not going through that development stage. So you're actually like,
it's still not good for you.
No, it's not. But I mean, it's even more consequential to do that at that time. It's the same as like early childhood. It like literally imprints it into their brain. And so, so that's what's happening for $680,000 a year. So that's just an example, right? And there are parallels in the adult system. And so, and this is happening to people whose communities have been disinvested for decades. So it's just when you put all the context together, it makes no sense, other than you were trying to enforce a particular kind of social order and you're succeeding at that, Yeah.
And I just want to add one piece, sorry, Sikander.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Thank you.
And that is that we are dealing with kids, but we're dealing with kids who themselves were victims. A lot of these kids have been abused, they've been neglected, they're in broken homes. They've grown up in poverty. They've grown up exposed to violence. And so, the cliche, right, is hurt people hurt people. And, what we're doing isn't working, and we're paying a lot of money for it. And I don't think I'm going too far out on a limb to say we can do a better job for a lot cheaper.
I agree. I think we all agree, but there are political interests that are vested in the systems being the way they are, including like the California Prison Guards Association, for example.
I mean, it's
Yes.
wild. Just when you're thinking, I like
Go
the
ahead.
context that you use, Nicole. Like this idea is that they'd rather invest $600,000 a year to damage children or to exacerbate the pain that young people have gone through, rather than investing a fraction of that money to provide resources and support that could really change the course of this young person's life to create safety for them, for their family, and for the community long term. And I think with that, I also want to just kind of add in a piece that I feel like needs to be said, and me and Nicole talk about this often, is that there's this idea that the progressive movement doesn't want accountability for people. So we also understand that things happen, people are violated. Like, it's not that there should be no accountability, but if there is accountability, it has to be coupled with, or has to be really led by, what is the reason for this thing happening, right? Like, why did this incident take place? What are the contextual pieces around it? And what can we do to, one is restore any harm that was done? And then how do we make sure that this never happens again with this young person, which is really not by locking them in a cage for 23 hours a day in isolation, causing more harm and damage to them, and then expecting them to come back out of juvenile hall and then just reintegrating into society as if nothing happened, And if you talk to anybody, social workers, teachers, scientists, doctors, everybody, all the information is there from all the people that deal with these young people, for all the people that do all the research. They have all the information. And what me and Nicole are sharing with you is not stuff that we made up or just from experience only. All the data is there that says that all of the stuff is harmful and all the stuff just makes the problem worse, but none of the policies align with any of the data or information or experience that we have. So
Completely agree. Unfortunately, we're almost out of time, but I do want to share information with people that might want to get involved with what you guys are doing. So how can they get involved in urban peace movement?
Yeah, so the best way to follow us kind of in real time, we do have a website. You can check it out. It is slightly out of date. And so the best time, because our staff are really on the ground. And so, yeah, so the best time, the best way to sort of see real time stuff is by following us on Instagram. And so, yeah, we do have a lot of community events. Some of the ones I described. This winter, we will be doing a healing and wellness festival that's sort of curated around a nail and barber pop-up. And it's called Scratch and Fade. So it's kind of like hip hop, nails, free nail appointments, free barber appointments, and then all these sort of healing and wellness services around it, like acupuncture, Reiki, and we make it available to the community for free. And so, there's just a lot of ways that folks can get involved by volunteering for events like that, coming out to events, telling their neighbors. And then, yeah, our young people are going to be launching a campaign, an organizing campaign later this year. It's not public yet, so I can't say what the issue is, but it's definitely related to the issues we've talked about today. And so there will be a lot of opportunities for folks to join our young people, at, Board of Supervisors hearings or city council meetings, to have your voices heard, and to help push for the kinds of changes that we talked about today.
Well, very good. Sikander, did you have any closing thoughts here?
no, thank you for having us on the show, and I'm really glad that I could be in a position to be able to do this work and do this work with Nicole. It's been an honor. So I'm just blessed to be here. So thank you so much, both of you.
Yeah, thank you both as well. Our Instagram, by the way, is @UrbanPeace510.
Thank you. So Nicole Lee and Sikander Iqbal from Urban Peace Movement, very vital work, especially now going on in Oakland, which, as I said, is kind of the epicenter for a lot of these fights right now. And this is just a critical issue of that. I think we're just wasting a lot of money on things that don't work very well. And we know what works well, because we know the kinds of programs that reduce recidivism, reduce violence. And it's not like this is a bunch of tax and spend, liberal gobbledygook that we're going to have to spend all this extra money on. Actually, I think, if we did this right, we'd spend a lot less money and focus it much more on education and trauma-based resources to help people actually succeed. This has been Everyday Injustice. I'm your host, David Greenwald. Join us again next week for more tales from the injustice system.
Thank you to George Powell and Norman Mousequake Barrett for the use of our opening, Everyday Injustice. You can see more of George's music at www.justiceforgeorgepowell.com.